Do you mind if I talk for a second? You've been talking about your problems and it's kinda depressing. I've been minding my own sorrow, pedaling through the metal, bobbing, weaving the treble. Niggas ain't on my level, but what's that? Insecure niggas placed on the pedestal. Crumble on sight, apply the pressure, it's pitiful. I've been in my mind all night counting minerals. Pride rockets and not what and if, it's when and who. Strategy.
What is going on, everyone? Psych Perspectives, giofvcks. We are going to finish chapter 4, Black Skin, White Mask, okay? So-called dependency complex of the colonized. I do apologize again for taking forever to finish these last few video discussions. Just had a lot going on. I'm gonna leave this off on page 72 of Black Skin, White Mask of chapter 4, right at the very beginning. But says Francis Jensen, every citizen of a nation is responsible for the acts perpetrated in the name of that nation, which I solely agree with. All of us, for example, here in the USA, or whichever nation, country you are a part of, when you see your country, nation impacting harm towards other people, even in the nation, within the country, within the confinements, and of course outside of the nation, outside of the country, you are just as responsible, because our tax dollars, at least here in the USA, is funding drone strikes that's killing innocent people across the world. In particular, right now, what's happening in Yemen under President Biden and Vice President Harris administration, as well, it was taking place under Trump, it was taking place under Obama and Biden, it was taking place under Bush and Cheney. You know, it's been going on regardless of political party affiliation. Our tax dollars are funding atrocities. I want to throw that out there. Privileged people live in their privileged worlds through their privileged worldview. Okay, this is very deep. I say this, right? Because as we follow up also on page 72, we said earlier that South Africa had a racist structure. We will go further and say that Europe has a racist structure. I will go further and say that the USA has a racist structure. Western civilization and many European countries have a racist structure. And quite frankly, white supremacy is a global problem. So globally, we have racist structures, in my opinion. When you look at it, so these racist structures, white people, for example, white Europeans who will sit up and say, well, I don't see color, there's no racism, I'm colorblind. That's the privilege of being white in a white supremacist society, okay? Heterosexuals, who I hear this often, well, why do LGBT people, why do gay people need pride? Why do y'all need pride? Why is June Pride Month? How come we don't have a straight Pride Month? Again, we have Pride Month because we spend our entire lives being ashamed of being gay, bisexual, pansexual, you know, asexual, being ashamed of being non-binary, gender fluid, transgender. We're not even allowed to go to the bathroom. Children can't play sports. There's reasons why we have pride. Again, heterosexual. Nobody's shaming you for being heterosexual. Nobody's shaming you for being cisgender. Nobody's taking your rights away because you're straight. Nobody's taking your opportunity to go to a fucking bathroom or play a sport because you're cisgender. I'm just throwing these examples out there, okay? Now moving forward, page 73, I really want to highlight this. Okay, I think page 73. Once again, we ask for caution from the author. A white man in the colonies has never felt inferior in any respect whatsoever. As Monsieur Manoni says so well, he will be defied and devoured. Although the colonizer is the minority, he does not feel he is made inferior. This is very deep because he's talking in particular to what's going on with the Malagazis in Madagascar, what's going on in South Africa, and then just in general. That's what he was talking about nearly 70 years ago. Well, here I am nearly 70 years later. I'm in the USA, and just globally speaking, regardless of what country you're in, white people, Europeans, are literally in everybody else's country, everybody else's culture. They've colonized the entire world. Technically, numerically speaking, there are way more people of color, black, brown, Asian, Hispanic, Latino, Native American, indigenous, Pacific Islander. There's more people of color on the planet than there are white European. And thus, despite all of that, who's colonizing who and who sees themselves as being superior through white supremacy and racist power structures? Superior even in countries that's not theirs, in land that's not theirs. Just wanted to throw that out there. I feel like, again, white supremacy and this superiority complex is also a form of mental illness, psychosis, neurotic behavior. That's just my personal hypothesis, if you will. Okay, and then he goes on to say, in South Africa, there are 2 million whites at the time. Now, mind you, this book is nearly 70 years old, okay? So at the time in 1959, there were 2 million whites to almost 13 million blacks. It has never occurred to a single black to consider himself superior to a member of the white minority. And this is what I mean by, to me, the superior is, there's a superiority complex, because that's just it. When I talk about liberation personally, I'm not trying to be superior to anyone. I'm not trying to be over cisgender people. I'm not trying to be over heterosexual people. I'm not trying to be over white people. I'm not trying to be over poor people. I'm not trying to be over wealthy people. I just want liberation for all people. I'm not trying to be superior. Okay, and it just amazes me how, despite all of this shit, you don't see, it's just, where do you get this mentality, this ideology, this belief that you are better than others and therefore you should be in charge and control and oppress and treat others like shit because you're viewing yourself as being better. You're putting yourself on a pedestal. There's a superiority complex. There's a mental health issue problem, in my opinion, with this, okay? And we get to the very, on the bottom, the conclusion of page 73. With this conclusion, we agree with Satat. The Jew is one whom other men consider a Jew. That is simple truth, from which we must start. It is the anti-Semite who makes the Jew. And I wrote in my notes, deep, the racist white supremacist has to create the other, right? And other Jewish people at the time, and still to this day, we just passed the historical anniversary of the Holocaust, and again, people being in concentration camps. And again, other, the Jewish person, the black person, the Hispanic Latino, the illegal immigrant, as if anyone is illegal. The earth is for everyone. But again, everybody is othered by the colonizer, the oppressor, the white supremacist, the racist, the bigot. Notice that. So has to create the other, thus creating the Jew, American blacks, etc. I always felt black folks, indigenous folks, people of color, are the world's bastard, right? Because in many cases, we all derive from the continent of Africa. Yet for black Americans in particular, through chattel slavery, the transatlantic slave trade, colonization, enslavement, abuse, genocide, just crimes against humanity, we are displaced. Because in many cases, for black Americans, and I'm speaking as a black American, in many cases, we're not welcomed on the continent of Africa, because even though we are derived and descendants from Africa, we don't know which country, which tribe we're from, culture we originate from. And you have the transatlantic slave trade, you're in the USA, and then you've been dispersed. That's why they call it the Africa diaspora. We're dispersed throughout the world, and you're not welcomed in the countries that you were dispersed to. You're not welcome in your native land either, because you don't really know where you're from in your native land. So that's why, in my opinion, I always have said and felt that black Americans in particular, and this can be said about other groups as well, are the world's bastard child, right? So to continue on, there are quite simply instances where the educated black man suddenly finds himself rejected by civilization he has nevertheless assimilated. And that's what I mean by no matter what black people do, black folks do, people of color do, colonized people do, marginalized people do, you talk the talk, you walk the walk, you're always seen as other and always being treated as other and thus less than, dehumanized, no matter how much you work to assimilate to that environment, to that society. And then page 75, Alagazis adopts his dependent behavior. All is for the best, but if he forgets his place, if he thinks himself the equal of the European, then the European becomes angry and rejects the upstart, who on the occasion and in this exceptional instance pays for his refusal to be dependent with an inferiority complex. So when you are, again, assimilating, this is why I always talk about, and I always say this, no matter how much education many of us get and will acquire, oppressor will never respect you. And how dare you be as educated as they are, as smart, as well-rounded, as hardworking, as dedicated, as ambitious, as human. Because they have clearly constantly have to keep saying that we're less human, we're 3/5 human, we're animals, we're barbaric, we're animalistic, we're savages, we're other, we're less than, we're all this other shit. They have to continue to do all of this, to create all of this, to justify their mental illness of white supremacy and their mental illness of that superiority complex. And this is just from my personal opinion and from research and reading. Information will always be in the description box below, and I always recommend that you do your own individual investigations and research. Let me get to 75. Again, we have no real acceptance or home in my opinion, but anytime blacks, or you can insert any marginalized, oppressed, disenfranchised identity or group as self-worth, doesn't view themselves as inferior. Because again, we've been taught that we're less than, but there's a lot of us that know that we're not less than, and when we don't view ourselves as inferior, achieve success, view ourselves in a high sense of self-worth, oppressors, along with the oppressive structures at place, reinforce the oppression, or hurdles, obstacles thrown our ways, death, laws, murders, policies, denial of human rights, for them to further reinforce that you are less than. I mean, it's a psychosis. To me, it's all mental. It's a mental illness. Then we get into page 75. Page 75, for instance, Martians, which Martesians set out to colonize, or Martins set out to colonize Earthlings, not initiate them into Martian culture, but colonize them. We would doubt that such a person could survive. Okay, and I'm gonna read this. And if blacks are impervious to the teachings of Christ, it's not because they are incapable of assimilating these teachings. Understanding something new requires us to be inclined, to be prepared, and demands a new state of mind. It's utopian to expect the black man and the Arab to make the effort of including abstract values in their Weltanschauung, which is a German word, and I did look it up. Weltanschauung, a particular philosophy or view of life, the world view of an individual or group. And this is a German word, right? I want to bring it up. When they have barely enough food to survive. Again, you're expecting marginalized, oppressed identities and groups to adapt this new way of life, this new philosophy. Yet their basic needs are not being met. In fact, they're being deprived of human rights and basic needs and resources that they need to also assimilate to this new way of life, this Weltanschauung, this philosophy, aka this oppressive way of life. And it made me think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We see often, if given equal access and opportunities, resources and support, people thrive and prosper, which then thus proves that there is no inferiority complex. Because again, often throughout history, for example, here in the USA, when black Americans, have been given opportunities to thrive, we have. Black Wall Street, we rise to the occasion. We go to the schools, we open up businesses, we run entire towns and communities. We build our families up, we build our friends up, we build our communities up. Hispanic and Latinos have done the same thing. Asian Americans have done the same thing. Asians have done the same thing. Multiple marginalized identities and groups have done the same thing when the opportunities are there, when the resources are there. But systemically throughout history and throughout policies and laws, we have had opportunities and resources stolen and deprived from our communities. And this has to be talked about and addressed. At the very beginning, nothing except that, or the very ending of 75, nothing except that the people in question lack the opportunities to thrive. So it's not an inferiority complex, it's the fact that people don't have opportunities. Now, are there people that are lazy? That's across individuals. That's across groups. It doesn't matter, because there's white people, there's oppressed people, there's oppressors who are lazy. I also want to say this. White supremacy, racism is about power and control. Control of resources, laws, policies, opportunities. Power over lives. Capitalism facilitates the way capital, finances, goods, services are manufactured and distributed in society and among the people. Capitalism, in my opinion, is slavery with a C. We're gonna leave that off on that, and part 5 of chapter 4 will be uploaded soon. Look at the links below, check out the links. Subscribe if you would like to. Check out the playlist to follow along with Black Skin, White Mask and the book club. Definitely do your own individual research and study, and share your thoughts, your perspectives. Let's discuss in a respectful manner. And as always, you all, thank you for joining, and more content is to come. Wear your mask, vaccinated if you can and want to, wash your hands, and stay 6 feet apart. I'm out.